Do I have chocolate in my teeth? All right, I'm good to go.
We're rolling.
You forgot to brush
All right.
them this morning.
So we're ready to get started. I'm giving you things that are very interesting to me, things that happened here, and how this community lived. To me, it's amazing what they had to do, how strict it was, and they're carving out of forests that had never been cut into
Virgin
to build their
forest.
home, virgin forest. That's the term I'm thinking. And it's just amazing how they did what they did, and you're going to see some of that today. I won't begin to finish this today, so this will go on until I'm done, and I'm not going to hurry it. I enjoy it. I enjoy talking about my church and the community. So
You mean you're gonna stretch it as long as you
no,
can?
I'm not stretching it. I'm not stretching. Matter of fact, I don't have everything in there I would like to have it.
Good.
Most of it.
Good.
All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to start at 1808. This is 50 years since our organization. And what I want to tell you about are the occupations.
Okay.
If you want to read that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
you
fine.
got there.
Among the
And I'll interrupt you from time to time, just like I did.
occupations and trades followed by those brethren who were members of the church at Graceham in or about 1808, some of them living in Graceham, but the majority on their farms, we find one storekeeper, John Krieger.
Now, let me stop you there. That is the second house up on the left-hand side. That was the first, that was a store. And there's a picture in the history of Graceham, and that actually went from property line to property line. You look at the picture, he built a house, and he built something onto it, and he built something onto it, then he went on this side and built something onto it. So it stretches from side to side.
On the side of the blue roof shed or house? No.
She's looking at her map.
Yeah, I wouldn't, no, that's the one below.
Below. Okay.
Okay. One storekeeper, John Krieger, and that's Krieger with a K, K-R-I-E, Krieger. One tanner, Godfrey Cease.
He was behind here. There was a log house back here, and somewhere, the church sold him a lot. And so that was where he had his tannery.
With several employees and 4 shoemakers, Christian Eigenbrod, Ludwig Pratzmann, Jacob Gump, and Jonas Eiler, spelled with an I instead of a Y. One nailsmith, Isaac Renatus Perry.
Now, I have nail samples over here that he made, probably. There was a Godfrey Cease that made nails on a corner where Ray Bryce used to live, the green house, on the other side of the cross street up here on the left, the corner house. So he was there, and then Godfrey Cease was there, and then he sold it to Harry, his business. So these nails over here came out of the church when they remodeled. So those nails were actually made by Harry, I'm sure.
One carpenter and millwright, Philip Woodring. One tavern keeper, John Wilhite. 2 tailors, Paul Cease and George Koch, the latter also a tobacconist. One tinsmith, Abraham Foz. One linen and damask weaver, Henry Foz. 2 weavers, Philip Willard and George Hahn. 3 carpenters and joiners, Jacob Bourne, John Jacob Weller Jr., Jacob Winch. 1 gunsmith, Jacob Christ. 1 smith and miller, Jacob Herbach. Now would be Harbaugh.
That would have been horrible.
2 blacksmiths, Samuel Herbach and Jacob Huber. 1 blue dyer and stocking maker, Traugott Gerlach. 1 doctor and surgeon, Henry Frederick Schumann. There were 19 farmers whose names are in the church register and catalog. In other words, Jacob Bourne, also a joiner, Peter Brunner, John Gump Sr., John Jacob Gump, Jonas Eiler, also a shoemaker, George Hahn, also a weaver, Christian Herbach, Peter Jansen, Lorenz Krieger, Jacob Protzman, John Willer, Andrew Willer, Henry Weller, Daniel Weller, John Jacob Weller, George Cease, also a smith, Philip Willard, also a weaver, John Wilhite, also tavern keeper. At the close of the Jubilee year in 1808, the congregation at Graceham consisted of 64 married people, 1 widower, 7 widows, 36 single brethren and older boys, 26 single sisters and older girls, 47 little boys, 36 little girls, making a total membership of 217, of whom 79 were communicant members.
See, Dominican wanted to know that.
Yeah.
So that's in there. There are a couple other, I went through and picked out a couple other dates that had how many people were here, so that's coming. Yes, sir.
They distinguished between carpenter millwright and carpenter joiner. Is that like the millwright would be the more industrial kind of work?
Probably.
A larger
joiner,
scale,
I
a
would-
joiner would be a cabinet maker?
Cabinet maker, that's what I thought. Yeah, without actually looking
That's-
the terms up.
That's what I'm kind of figuring.
It's interesting that some of these names are names that we find in the history of Bethlehem. Protzman, we've got a number of ministers who came from Protzmans. The Willard that's in here is what we would today call Willard, with a D at the end. It does not have a D on the end in this spelling.
Well, that was Vilgar, Wilgar. It must be 5 or 6 spellings for
Yes,
Willard.
and these folks were ones who had that happening of when you came off the boat from Europe, the guy who's writing down listens to how you say your name and he spells it the way he wants. He might even change your name. And then you find out what it is that the government is saying that you are. And a lot of people just change their name to go with what it was the guy wrote down. And that happened up and down the East Coast as the ships came in and people came to America. And these, this is early. That was still happening in the mid 1800s when a ship would come in with immigrants.
Any more questions on that?
What was the miller using to turn his wheel? I mean, the creek kind of far away. Did they have like oxen moving the thing?
Well, they were on the creek.
So
We had
it'd be
Hoover's,
this creek down the
yeah,
down
had
the
Hoover's
road
Mill.
here.
I got a good story about that coming. But Hoover's Mill, I didn't bring it today, but I have the stencil from Hoover's Mill. That when they they had a bag, and they put the bag down, I guess they had a mop brush or something. They went like that over the stencil, and it said Hoover's Mill. G.A. Hoover or something like that on it. So I'll bring that and show that to you. That's all I have. I know where the mill was when I was younger. The walls were still standing, but it's not there. When you look at it now, you think, how did water ever get to that mill? And I don't know. There was a flume somewhere, but yeah, there's lots of mills around. Apples Church, there was a mill. There were mills everywhere. At the bottom of Hessen Bridge Road, from the corner of Jimtown down, on the left, there was a mill in there, because that's the mill house that's there now. That's that brick house. So there were mills everywhere. But I got a good story coming up. Can you read 1803? I love this story.
I'm not sure where.
1803,
Okay.
Indians in town.
August 2nd, 1803. Brother Schlegel writes, "This morning I was informed by a brother that a company of Indians had encamped in the woods about 3 miles from here and were just about to continue their journey. I immediately set out on the Emmitsburg Road and met them, 15 in all, with their wives and children. As we found that there were 2 chiefs of the Tuscarora Indians and their interpreter, Mr. Green, with them, We invited them to dine and rest some hours with us, which invitation they accepted the more readily when they heard the Moravians lived here. As soon as we were seated in the large schoolroom, the principal chief expressed his pleasure at finding Christians here and wished us much good from the Great Spirit. He told us that their friends in New York had sent them their father, Elka Holmes, who instructed them and their children. After dinner, when many of our members and their children arrived,
That something's missing.
yeah, there's a verse missing, but an anthem and verses by the children were performed.
Let me just say, many times in history, and this is the only time you're gonna hear it probably, is if someone special came to town, they whipped up a church service, I mean, right now. I mean, so a group of people, when they heard the Indians were here, and they were gonna have, well, they lived in town. I mean, there's 25, 30 houses here in town, or whatever was here at that time. Not that many, but they'd had nothing better to do, so they came to church, and they probably wanted to.
And did you not go? He heard the Indians were there, he got on his horse, and he went out to them instead of just letting them leave.
This is an exceptional pastor, because he died with his boots on. He had a stroke, and he was continuing to preach. Matter of fact, it says in there one time, he preached in German, and there was enough English-speaking people in the congregation that they wanted to hear him speak English. And he spoke English. And they said, the remark that someone made, that this is probably his last. So he probably knew it, and the congregation knew that he wasn't going any further. He's buried at Graceham in the cemetery over here. He was wonderful. He ministered at Catoctin Furnace. He began the ministry at Catoctin Furnace among the slaves. This guy was one good pastor.
And what was his name again?
Schlegel.
Schlegel. Schlegel. Schlegel. Okay, and I stopped. After dinner, when many of our members and their children, there was an anthem by the choir and verses by the children. An address to the chiefs by the children was read by two little boys, and a written copy was given to them at their request. The principal chief replied to the address in a long speech consisting of 3 long sentences, calling the children here his grandchildren and admonishing them to practice only that which was good. Brethren afterwards declared that they could not have made such an address. Thereupon I expressed in the name of our congregations the wish that the Tuscaroras also might accept the sweet gospel which was preached to them by Father Holmes. He thanked the congregation here for their kindness and said he felt here was Christianity that consisted in the knowledge and love of God. We closed with a prayer for the salvation of all heathen and all nations. Nothing touched the Indians so much as the singing of the children, so that the chiefs could scarcely speak for emotion. A brother and I accompanied them for 4 miles and recommended them to Mr. Hughes in Emmitsburg, a good friend of ours, one of whose children I had buried.
Okay, any questions? It was wonderful, I thought.
Yeah.
If you want to go to 72, 73, 72 through 76, this is a bird's eye view in town. And I say, we're reading some of these things because I don't want to paraphrase it. I want nothing left out. I want how the pastor worded it, how he thought about it, instead of me just throwing some loose ends in.
Okay, a bird's eye view of Graceham.
This is 1808, I think.
Yes.
And we've been here 50 years.
Let us take a brief glance at the little village which has grown up during the 26 years since the first houses in it were built. For 22 years after the Gemein House, or combined church, parsonage, and schoolhouse, had been built in 1748, it stood alone in the woods until Adam Camp in 1771 bought 2 acres of land adjoining Delaney's gift and built a house and stable there near the Gemein House, a little to the east of it. 11 years later, in 1782, about 30 acres of land had been bought from Joseph and Mary Butler. Lots were laid off, and the first two houses of Graceham were erected near the Gemein House by Christian Leinbach and John Camp. This was 24 years after the congregation had been organized, and 26 more years had passed since the building of the first houses, making together 50 years since the organization, when the Jubilee celebration of 1808 was held. In the 26 years since building the first houses, a great change had gradually taken place around the Gemein House that stood as a solitary sentinel of the church militant for so many years. The wish expressed by Bishop John von Watteville in 1785, when, after 3 houses had been built, the name Graceham was given to the incipient village, that soon a dozen houses might stand near the Gemein House, has been fulfilled. Where the trees of the forest had stood so long in undisturbed security, there is, in 1808, a well-ordered settlement built up by members of the Moravian Church, no others being at that time permitted to live in Graceham, whose dwellings, although for the most part of primitive construction, are well-built log houses, some of them standing in part to this day. They are comfortable.
I think all of them, except those that burned down, are standing today. But I look up through town, and most of them are the original homes from that era.
You mean there's still logs on the
Yeah,
machine?
all of them. Beatrice's house, all those houses. Doug Fornwall's house, most of the houses up this side of the street on the left, except the stone house. Yep, the tavern was made out of brick.
Tom's family home, when you walk in, I can touch the ceiling. You
Yeah,
know?
the kitchen area up there, when you go to the
Yeah.
basement, you can still see the unused logs and the wide plank floor.
Yeah, all the houses going up the street. Some of them don't look like they would be log, but they are.
You mean this house that looks like it's falling apart? It's log?
It's
on there?
log.
So primarily chestnut, oak, and
Oh, golly.
Poplar.
poplar.
Probably the poplar didn't hold up as well, but the chestnut and oak would hold up.
Black walnut.
Ooh,
Yeah, I don't
Like
know.
black
Of course,
walnut.
wood was, I mean, it was
Right.
just everywhere.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you just cut it down because there were trees everywhere.
gee, they don't.
The source
they
was
don't
there.
Take the shingle off. It'll be really nice for somebody to
But-
fix it.
25 years later, the history says, and I didn't tell you that, no more trees were left. They were all harvested,
Oh, yeah.
except those that wanted for shade.
They didn't replant them?
No, they wanted gardens and farms and fields and stuff. They didn't want trees.
Clearly.
Yeah.
But most people had a lot in the mountain where they cut timber from. Of course, that's a long haul.
When we grew up, our grandparents owned a lot that was the wood lot up on the mountain. And it was something that the men would go off and gather wood for the wood stoves and that type of thing.
I remember the Smith brothers had a lot up there. We used to go and cut wood when I was young. We wouldn't cut wood for heat in the winter.
Yeah.
Okay, whose dwellings, although for the most part of primitive construction, are well-built log houses, some of them standing in part to this day, that would be 1808. They're comfortable and well-kept and are surrounded by their gardens and orchards and cultivated fields, and in part by the woodland that has not yet yielded to the settlers' axe. Most of the lots have been laid off, about 20 in number have been built on, and there are more than a dozen houses on both sides of the street. At the lower end of the village, we see the 2-story brick parsonage, which in 1797 replaced the original log building and the church adjoining it, built of planks 4 inches in thickness in 1772. There is no road passing immediately south of the church lot, which is fenced off on all sides and extends to the fields south of it. The parsonage garden is right before the western gable end of the house towards the village street. the south side of the house being considered the front, in which there is a door by which the school children enter and pass into the schoolroom.
That door was closed to a window, and now it is a door from the vestibule. So when you come in the vestibule and go into the old part, that was a window.
Where the corner cupboard is.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. In the rear of the church lot is that one on which Brother Godfrey Cease has his tannery. It started in 1778 by Brother Adam Gurnand and conducted by him until 1799. Mike and I went to the local schools, and the art teacher was Arthur Gurnand. The name continued. Okay. In the hollow behind the church, a log spring house for the use of the minister's family. Nearby is the path along the hollow leading from the church to the cemetery on the opposite hill. The cemetery is divided into 4 quarters by intersecting paths. Cedar and pine trees have been planted in it, and their shadows fall on more than 100 graves marked by the lowly mounds and small tombstones. Northeast of the cemetery, there is a large field, a part of the Honorable Daniel Delaney's gift of 10 acres in 1747, and south of the cemetery, we see the minister's well-kept orchard of apple and other fruit trees. In front of the church and parsonage lot on the west side stands a horse shed for the use of those members who come to church from their farms in the mountains and valleys and elsewhere. And at one side of the alley, as it is called, which leads down into the hollow, we see the watering trough fed by the spring in the so-called spring lot.
There's a spring that feeds the pond, used to be, now only when it's wet, it's running now. But somewhere over there was a watering trough where the people in the community brought their animals to be watered. Otherwise they had hand dug wells, or there they could just go and drink. I haven't any idea where it is. I suspect it's in the area where the pond is, but I don't know that for sure.
You mean it's still there?
What?
You mean it's still there?
The spring is there, but not the watering trough.
Not the water trough.
No.
Yeah.
Is the pond on here? Is
Yes, it is. It's that oblong thing.
Oh, okay.
It's black looking.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was built during the WPA days.
Oh, yeah.
WPA workers
Okay.
built that for
Look
static
at the
water
option.
supply.
Did Carl Engelberger take this picture?
No, I got it from county records.
Thanks. Cause you know, he had that business
Yes.
for taking pictures from this plane. Thank you, Mike.
I can also take pictures with my drone if you want.
Well, yeah,
Wow.
yeah, nowadays, yeah, cool.
We see the watering trough fed by the spring in the so-called spring lot, where there is also a spring house built May 12, 1784 for the families in the village, at that time only 3 in number. On the south and west, the church and parsonage lot joins the tract of 38 acres purchased in 1781 from Joseph and Mary Butler. On a part of this tract, lots have been laid off, on some of which houses, shops, and other outbuildings have been erected on both sides of the street, which as yet, though no thoroughfare, the public road from Baltimore to Hagerstown and Pittsburgh, passing through the woods and fields on the south of the village. On the south side of the street, at its lower end, where it terminates at the church and parsonage lot, stands a log house, the first house of Graceham, built by Christian Leinbach in 1782. And on the next lot, separated from the other by an alley, there is also a log building built 6 days after the first by John Camp, but sold by him in 1792 to Brother William Limke, who built an addition to it and conducted there the first store opened in Graceham. After his death in 1800, Brother Lorenz Krieger bought the Limke houses in 1803, and his son John Krieger is the storekeeper in 1808. On the next lot, we see the widow Protzman's little house, built in 1784. And
This- This is Joanne's house, Joanne Fuss.
And the,
This is where she lives. The next one is an original home which she owns also.
and then John Harbaugh's built in 1802, then Ludwig Protzmann's in 1788, and Isaac Renatus Harry's built by Godfrey Cease in 1790,
That's the fallen down house that they fixed up.
Okay.
and sold by him together with his nail smithy to Brother Harry in 1800. Next is the house built by Brother Philip Woodring in 1801. Then follow 3 vacant lots, and then we see John Wilhite's Tavern, a 2-story brick building erected in 1804 and 1805, where 2 streets meet. On the southwest corner of these 2 streets stands a house built probably by Godfrey Cease after he had sold his house in the village to Brother Harry, as he, Godfrey Cease, had bought a piece of ground there, 1 acre and a quarter in extent, which the congregation bought from him in 1799 for £35, about $100. On the northwest corner, opposite to Godfrey Cease's house, is a log house built by Paul Cease in or about 1800.
That's that one that has where somebody ran into the end of it, ran into the side of the house, there's a big hole.
Looking down the north side of the street from this point, we notice first 3 vacant lots. On the 4th, there is a frame blacksmith shop, and on the next lot is Christian Eichenbrode's house, built in or about 1803. Next is the house of his mother, the widow Eichenbrode, built in 1792, and then comes a house probably built by Peter Gunther, a potter, in 1786, but sold by him to John Protzmann of Hagerstown in 1793. This,
That'd be Michelle's house, right?
No, I don't think it's coming.
It's
Ludwig,
going up the street, right?
yeah, Ludwig Moeller was Michelle's house. He was a potter.
this house also had been built by Jacob Winch, the carpenter, in 1803, as it was later occupied by either Abraham or Henry Foss Jr.,
He was the first developer in Frederick County.
whose father or grandfather, Jacob Foss of York, Pennsylvania, received in 1804 as a creditor of the Winch estate. Next to this is Ludwig Moeller's house, built in 1793, and John Damoth's next to the spring lot
Petrus's house, John Demuth.
in 1796, closing the row on the north side of the street. These lots in the village that have not been built on, those lots, and the fields that have been cleared are cultivated by members of the congregation to whom they are rented for a term of years. But there is still some woodland between the lots on the south side of the street and John Biggs' land. Some of the members who own houses that front on the main street have laid sidewalks of flagstones before their houses, as the street is sometimes very muddy, but others have not yet done so. Cows are not allowed on the street at night, but during the day may be seen there, and the pigs sometimes find their way into the fields and do more or less damage to the growing crops. Although the fences are generally kept in good condition, rails being either cut on the woodland owned by the congregation or contributed by some of the brethren, no traffic passes through the village, but there is considerable on the public road just south of it, with which the village street makes connection beyond the upper and by the new road just opened. Good order prevails in the settlement, all of the residents being members of the congregation, and as such expected to sign and conform to the regulations of the brotherly agreement, as well as to those which they choose to adopt in their collective capacity as householders for the benefit of the community.
Thank you. So there you are. Any questions? All right, so I'm gonna move on. These are, the Moravian Church sanctioned the tavern. You'd think that would be a funny thing to do, but all probably, I'm guessing, paraphrasing, made wine or had wine available in their homes. But I am going to read, what?
And beer.
beer.
Oh, yes.
Now, I'm going to read the
Raise
rules.
months.
We even went to the
Germans.
trouble
Schnapps.
to make rules for the tavern.
Well, wasn't the tavern also like a place to spend the night when
Yeah,
there
it
was no
was.
hotel?
It was for lodging.
Right.
And it's gonna say, they had rules for just about everything in here. Inasmuch as permission has been granted to Johannes Wilhide to keep an inn, it has been considered necessary to recommend the following points for his instruction and observance. And they are Graceham being intended solely for the residence of members of the Evangelical Brethren's Church, who conduct themselves in accordance with the brotherly agreement and the town ordinances. The said brother Johannes Wilhide will constantly bear in mind this design of the place, and by word, deed, approved himself accordingly as a true member of this congregation. The same is also required of all members of his household, in order that all visiting strangers may obtain good, pleasant impression of our town. So they didn't want a shoddy organization. He will therefore receive a friendly manner all persons who put up at his house, and supply them with food and drink at reasonable rates. But no liquor shall be given to anyone who is already intoxicated. He will especially be careful to keep unadulterated liquors of the best quality. No cheap booze. No drink shall be furnished while there is divine service on Sundays, except in the greatest necessity.
Is that hair from the dog?
As upon the whole, the entertainment of guests on Sundays and festival days, except in the case of those who come expressly to attend the service, is to be avoided as much as possible. They didn't want to do any more business than they had to do on Sunday. He will carefully watch those who may come only to make merry, and perhaps bring objectionable women with them, and not permit them to lodge here. Also to remove every opportunity for misconduct and immorality. He will also not allow fiddling, dancing in his house, nor setting up of a billiards table. He will be particular to see that the house is closed at 10 a.m. and that all guests who not remain overnight leave it. He will endeavor to keep out of his house members of our congregation, and especially young people, if they have no special business to transact. And if they ask for anything to drink, tell them they can drink at home. For the glory of God and the good of the congregation, Brother Wilhide and his household will govern themselves to the best of their ability according to the above instructions, so that this house may have a good name and the blessing of God may rest upon it. So there you are. That is what I'm talking about. Now, I'm going to do more Graceham occupations, but this is 1778. We're pretty far along here. So, Graceham is on the Western Mountain Railroad, 57 miles from Baltimore, pleasantly situated in a mild and healthy climate. The land is good and sells from $25 to $60 per acre. 50 to 80 bushels of wheat per acre, 40 bushels of oats, 80, bushels of potato, 60 bushels of corn, 1.5 tons of hay. The Moravian Church and the public school, a population of 250. Caroline Cease was a postmistress, agent of the railroad, Fire and Johnson. Blacksmith was George Esser. Boot and shoe manufacturers were B.C. Cauliflower and S. Cauliflower. Cigar manufacturers were S.A. Gernand and Company. Drovers, John Crum. Drovers as a bovine or horses, moving them. John Crum and Donnie Owen. A huckster, A. Late. General merchandise, W.J. Kramer. And Fire and Johnson, there must have been two. S.A. Gernan, Jensen, wow, gee whiz, there's a lot of them here. General Merchandise. W.J. Kramer, Fire and Janssen, S.A. Gernan, and Mr. B.C. Jensen. Justice of the Peace, C.L. Fire, Millers, C.H.I. Colds, and Samuel Hoover, G.A. like down here. A physician, S.W. Miller. Saddles and Harness, John Gernan. A tailor, U.W. Smeltzer. Wagon and Plowmaker, C.L. Fire.
A lot of these names still live in this area.
Absolutely.
The cauliflower name is our great-grandmother's ancestors.
Well,
We came to this church through cauliflowers,
That's
not
right.
through Fishers or Millers or.
Fishers were Lutherans.
Crumbs and Kramer, Walker's.
That's
Yes.
Walkersville.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah, they bought had a
How's fire
Crumbs.
spelled in there?
Yeah,
Huh?
Crumbs and
Fire spelled F-I-O-R?
Walkersville.
Yeah,
It's the same fire as,
so we had fires,
There were still a couple in Thurmont.
yeah, well, Ross Fire drove a school bus when I was a kid. They owned the Jerry Moser farm at one time.
Yeah, Crumbs and Crumbs.
Early on, the fires owned that, Jacob Weller's farm.
Cauliflower like the vegetable.
Spelled the same?
I traced the genealogy
I was
back to
interested, I
cauliflower,
wonder what it really was about.
and they're from France, it was Grenflo. How it was pronounced in France, and it got changed to cauliflower, I guess, in English.
Say it again in French.
Grenflo,
Grenflo, okay.
or something like that.
Now, these people with these names, that they came from Pennsylvania, or they were in
Mostly,
the woods here?
mostly everything came into Philadelphia.
Yes.
Some could have come from New York, but I think mostly Philadelphia.
Okay.
Through Lancaster, through York, through Hanover, through Tawnytown, and then on back roads to here. And then it kept on going, but everyone did. When they went south, we're getting ready to talk about the Wachovia wagon. It went that
Yeah.
way. That was the path. Now then, it didn't, that wasn't 695, that was the path, but there were other smaller roads, but that was the main road. You heard Ann say that the traffic back of town was significant. Nothing went through town. Not much
And
happened.
by that,
But
you
back
meant Old
there,
Frederick Road?
there were
South
wagons
Road.
were coming and going.
And they were using the road
It's a,
that way
it's
behind
a
the church.
Graceham
Yes.
bypass.
Not this road, not this road.
Would it be 15, because it's a old historic route?
Well,
I was thinking Old Frederick
Frederick
Road,
Road.
through
no,
Hagerstown. That
this
the
was a
main
dirt road.
There is a road, my in-laws had a farm close to the covered bridge, Lois, and there is the trace of an old road that goes over their fields, and that is the road
Old
that,
Frederick
That
Road?
they were using.
Yes.
Because this road
they called
was
it South
being laid.
Road.
Yeah, they changed names, but
Yeah.
it currently
Yeah.
would be Old
When-
Frederick
When we're
Road.
talking about who's related to whatever, we would be not doing a good job. We didn't mention all these Wellers that are mentioned. Dennis's mother's family's Wellers. Dennis is related to those
He's a
beginnings.
straight line from the Wellers.
Yes.
His mother was a Weller. Unfortunately, Pap just had girls, he didn't have any boys. But Dennis is a straight line from the Wellers, from the founding members of his church.
Are all of these
Even
German?
antique.
What?
Is everybody German?
Pretty much.
German, yes. Except cauliflower, if she says they're French, or Michael says they're French, I'll believe him because I don't know that.
So it,
But a
This time-
French girl with a male German.
Probably.
Yeah. A
But-
French girl with a
But they married a... Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't see the genealogy.
still having services in German, right?
At this time,
And
yes.
I didn't look it up. Well, 1830s,
It's a
at this point in time, yeah, we're already having, when I did this, the people who live here, 1878, that was English. About 1830, it went to English. But prior to that, I'd say from 1700 or 1775 or so, it would be English, German, and then a little bit of English. and they kept more and more English took over. I guess at that time they became,
Dutch.
the Germans learned English, and that was the end of that.
We know that the Hessian soldiers, many of them found other Germans here, and they did not go back to Europe when our Revolutionary War was over. I have a relative of my mom's family. They were Frailes, and the originator of the Frailes was a Hessian soldier, and he was one of the ones, maybe, who lived in those cute little houses down there that they open up and let you go through. I have a friend who is the director of Mount Olivet, and he loves doing genealogy. So there are 3 of us who are classmates who are related to this Fraley. So he printed it out as a gift and gave to all of us so that we know who this person was who started the Fraleys. And I've always told people that our mountain was a good place to hide from anybody who was trying to find them and ship them back, because once they got up into the mountains, you had to know your way around to be able to find somebody and they could stay. And here they could buy land. Where they came from, they couldn't buy land. They were considered lesser people. The Count had lots of land, but he wasn't selling it to
Page 36.
Yeah,
36.
The Wachovia wagons.
Okay, 36.
How did they change different from a Conestoga?
How did they change?
What's the difference in the construction of a Conestoga wagon versus this type of wagon?
Wachovia.
Wachovia.
A Wachovia.
Well, that's not
Was
the
it
name of the,
flatbed?
Wachovia is not the name of the maker of the wagon. It's where it came from. Winston-Salem area.
Here.
I want,
Okay,
Let
start
me see.
reading. Yeah, I see Wachovia over there. That's
Have a picture of it?
no.
let
There
me-
is a picture in the book of the inn, of what it looked like when it was brick before it got stuccoed.
Are you asking about the wagon?
I was just interested, is it a flatbed wagon?
No.
The
It's the top over.
It is a
It's like
Conestoga.
And they were made different. People who made them, they were made for different occasions.
Okay.
I imagine this
Purposes.
Conestoga wagon was heavier built,
yeah.
beating it up and down over stumps and rocks.
Maybe like a buckboard kind of thing.
No,
Top
this was a
covered,
covered, this was a
yeah.
covered
Well, I mean,
wagon.
with the cover.
Yeah.
Had to
With
swoop
the
it
cover.
back.
Covered.
I don't know that, I've never seen one, but I've read I got a book about Winston-Salem, about the same thing as Graceham's history. And they had special wagons built to do to beat them up and down all this way.
Yeah. So they covered the stuff that they was in it.
Oh,
because
yeah,
the wagon
yeah,
was-
because they had
Yeah.
perishables in there.
Yeah.
You couldn't have rain, and they had to have someplace to sleep.
Clothes, everything, yeah, there wasn't like a car.
And when they traveled, it's not unlike those who were going west. The women and children slept inside, the men slept under, so that they were the first defense if there were issues.
So I got pictures on the internet here. A Conestoga wagon, a lot of them are flat with canopy over it. They showed the wagons that went from northern colonies to North Carolina. The bottom was flat, but it had a curve to it. The top had a curve to it. I don't know why. They use it as a boat sometimes to cross a stream or river. I don't
To
know.
let the water when it rains.
You have to understand, they cross streams all the time. And a lot of these roads, the ford and the river, or the streams, decided where they're gonna cross. Because if you look at the Monocacy, there's places a hill's 100 feet high, you're not gonna jump down there. So, like Poe's Ford, south of Kriegerstown, where the park is there was a ford there, because that water's pretty shallow.
They were all dirt road.
And Biggs Ford.
They were dirt road.
And Biggs
you know.
Ford,
Yeah,
they
you had
had-
to go through the dirt.
There's where they crossed. So those areas determined where that road was going to be.
Yeah.
They weren't looking for a straight shot.
Yeah.
They'd love to have had it maybe, but anyhow, here we go. 10 minutes? Okay, thank you. 1779, May the 6th, a general day of prayer. Early today, Henry Schneider and Hartman came with the Wachovia wagon, and in the evening continued on their way to Wachovia. September 3rd, the brethren Fred Muller and Henry Schneider, who were passing with their wagon from Carolina, called on us. October 9th, towards evening, Henry Schneider came from Lidditz to get provision for the journey of Brother Reichel and Brother Marshall to Wachovia. See, they went to, this thing was like a Uber. He went up there and got supplies they needed, took information, letters, and whatever else. Did they need people or what they needed? And it came back. We were, October the 12th, we were busy with the curing of meat bought by Henry Schneider for their brethren going to Wachovia. October the 14th, Henry Schneider went to meet the wagon, and on the 16th, Lawrence Krieger Jr. also went with 2 horses, and I rode to the other side of Monocacy where Brother Marshall arrived quite late, but not Brother Reichel this time. October 18th, the travelers set out on their journey to Wachovia after the wagon had been loaded with provisions bought here, viz. with meat, butter, biscuits, and oats. In September 1780, therefore, during the war, Conway, I'm reading too far, so I'm going to stop there.
Okay.
So that's the Wachovia wagon I talked about.
Any notion what a round trip to Wachovia and back, or Bethlehem and back, how long would it take?
You know, I'd have to look in my Winston-Salem book. I think it's in there, it's not in here.
think it is.
That would have been an end destination, and maybe I have a Bethlehem book that's like this. Maybe it's in there, what the round trip was like.
That's a whole lot of Virginia to travel.
I imagine it's a month.
Yeah, they're hitting the deepest part of Virginia.
Yeah.
over there.
20 to 30 miles per day was typical in those days. Because you had to let the horses rest, find water, find food for them to graze, usually the grass.
I gotta stop here. Well, we made some headway. Is it okay?
Yeah.
We're gonna keep on till I got more pages.
How many Moravians are in Graceham now in the houses?
Oh, that's a good question.
I might know.
Not an exact number, but you got, for my daughter,
What number are we gonna take for your house, because it fluctuates?
yeah, well, you figure Becca's second name's 5, and Nancy's not a member, we've got a girl,
So that's 3.
Joanne.
Joanne and
Joanne, Bernie,
Pastor's wife.
myself, Jennifer, Jenny, Michelle,
But when,
Douglas, formal.
Doug Cornwall, Brian, there's another house too, Mike, with low ceiling. The house that Brian and Carol Butler live in. That's a good house.
That's a log house.
Yeah. Right beside the tavern.
Yeah.
Right tavern. Brian and Carol Butler,
Yeah, these are, most of them
trying to think.
are not new.
Yeah.
They're old. So, all right, I'll see you next week. Thank you very much.
you're gonna say a prayer now.